everybody, welcome back to Wow Mom Cooking for the Super Bowl edition. Today we are being brought to you by Mike Anderson at Keller Williams Realty. So today we're going to be doing football foods. So grab your pens, your papers, and your aprons, and let's get cooking with wow. We are going to start with something I call pork chips. They're kind of like pork chops. They have a potato chip crust. It's really easy to make. That's why we have this big bowl of potato chips here. We're going to start with some of those. We're going to put these into our bowl and we are going to crush these. If you have leftovers at the bottom of the bag, that works great too. Otherwise, just crush them up. See that? They're perfect. What we're going to do is add some spices to these to make it taste even better, and then we are going to fry these. I've already got my pork chops ready. What I did was I purchased some thin sliced pork chops. When I brought them home, I trimmed off the excess fat and then I cut them in half because these are going to be either for a slider or for a finger food. We're going to make these so that they're available a couple of different ways. So we will make the chutney that's going to go with these if you want to use them as a finger food. We're going to use some pears and nectarines for that. We went out the other night and had a plum mango chutney that came with some coconut shrimp. Delicious. Kind of got me thinking about a chutney. It's always good with pork to have fruit with it, so that's why we're going to add that in there. It's really simple and I'm going to show you guys how to make that too. So let's finish this up. We want these to be pretty fine. So if you want to use a food processor, you can do that too. I like to play with my hands, so I usually do it this way. You can also, if you have a really large mortar and pestle, use one of those. So to this, we are going to add about a tablespoon of onion powder and about a tablespoon of garlic. Same thing. And then we're gonna continue to crush this up because it's not quite small enough yet, but let's get this incorporated. So we're gonna put about a tablespoon in of each of these. And we're also going to add some spicy Parmesan grated cheese. It's not really spicy, but it kind of has a little flavor in it. It's delicious. Now, if you could smell this, you would want to eat this already. You can use any kind of chips you want. Today I used plain ones, just regular potato chips. If you have, say, the sour cream and onion, or Doritos even, fabulous. Makes a really, really great breadcrumb kind of thing that goes on to anything. We're just going to use this on these little pork chops we're going to make. Okay, so it's getting nice and small. And what we're going to do now is add the Parmesan cheese in. And you're going to see this is absolutely delicious. It'll brown up real nice. We're probably going to put about 1/4 cup of the Parmesan cheese in. It adds a great, great flavor. If you can happen to get this one, this is called hot and spicy grated cheese topping. It's just something that's really yummy. I wish you guys could smell this. Now, the other thing we're gonna need for this is an egg wash. We're just gonna put a couple of eggs because we're gonna do a lot of pork chops. So we're gonna do a couple of eggs at a time. We'll dip these in the egg and then we'll dip them in our mixture here. And then we're gonna take them over to the stove and we are going to fry these guys up. Now, one thing remember we always do is we want to take these out of the fryer and put them onto a rack. So make sure you have your baking rack ready. Nothing worse than something soggy after it's supposed to be crispy, right? So let me grab my towel so I can wipe my hands off. We're going to do a couple of batches of this because I have a lot of pork chops to do. We're also going to save a few of these pork chops that I've cut up for something different. We are going to also make a lettuce wrap for those that show up at the party that are a little bit more health conscious. Here's our pork chops. They look beautiful. They're ready to go. All I did was trim off the excess fat, like I said. I cut them in half and they're perfect size for a little roll. So you'll see that in just a minute too. Let's get our eggs ready. We've got 3. We're going to use a lot of this because we're going to do a lot of pork chops. There's one. These are fresh They are from a local farm, and when you get them from a local place or you buy them at the farmer's market, one of the really nice things about that is you can keep your eggs at room temperature. They are so much better to cook with that way. They just make your textures better and make everything just come out a little bit more that way. These happen to be from Hilliker's Egg Ranch. They are local here in Lakeside. They're at some of our farmers markets, some of the markets that I used to go to. We just want to mix this up real well. This is going to help all these little pieces of potato and the little spices we put in there stick to our pork chops when we cook them. So we will dredge these in here before we stick them in there. Okay, now we have our egg, our potato mixture, and I'm going to turn the heat on to the stove so that we can start cooking these things up and getting them out onto the rack so they can cool and move on to our next step. So let me turn that on, and then I'm going to show you guys what we do. I'm going to start with one, and then we're going to move over to the stove so you guys can see everything. Take one of our little pork chops. We want to drop it right into the egg mixture. Now here's an important part. Let it drip off a little bit. You don't want it to be so wet that it just sucks everything up and makes that crispy potato mixture dry, wet. You want it to be dry when it goes into your hot oil because you want it to be crispy when it comes out. So we are going to press it in to that mixture. We'll throw some on top and we'll press that again. And you'll see if you press it, it'll stick. So what we want to do with this is take it over to the stove and get working on frying these up. So we're going to move everything over there and show you how to do it. We have the first batch of our pork chops all ready to go into the oil. I think the oil's hot. What we're going to do is just take a little pinch of our crumbs and drop it in there. Perfect. It starts to sizzle. That's exactly what we want. So we're going to drop these in. Now because these are really thin, they don't take long to cook at all. And you're going to see by the time I get all 4 or 5 of these in there, maybe even 6 in this pan, they're going to be ready to turn over already. This looks so good. Now be sure when you take them out of your potato mixture, you shake them just a little bit because you don't want to lose any of that potato crust into the oil. You want it to stay into your bowl so you can do some more. So like I said, they don't take very long. This first one that I dropped in is just about ready to flip over. You can see it already starting to brown up on the edges, and as I turn it, you'll see it's already starting to brown. So what we want to do is just turn those over. They're going to be nice and crispy. Let them finish cooking up on this side. And then we'll take them out. What we're going to do when we take them out is we are going to put them on a rack. I have a rack here sitting on the stove. It's on top of a cookie sheet so that if anything drips, it goes right onto the cookie sheet and won't go onto the stove and make a mess. It'll also keep those our potato crispy pork chops, our pork chips, nice and crispy because that's how we want them to be in the end. Whether it's going to go on a little sandwich or it's going to be a finger food with some dip, you want it to be crispy. So let's see how we're doing. I can smell them starting to cook. I can smell all the flavors coming out, so that means they're getting just about ready. We're going to flip them one more time just to make sure. We want to get a little bit of a golden brown color. And also you want to keep an eye on your temperature. If your oil seems to start to get too hot, it starts to spit, just turn it down just a smidgen because remember you're going to put more in here and you want it to stay a consistent temperature so everything cooks about the same amount of time. So we've got some of these smaller ones that are looking really brown, really delicious. As soon as one's ready, I'm going to take it out and show you guys. Now I made these as a test about 2 weeks ago. My kids and their friends were here and they disappeared so quickly you have no idea. They said, Mom, you gotta make these. Those things are great. And I was just throwing something together for them to eat that day. So these have now become something that's a favorite at my house. They absolutely love them. These look just about ready. Now hear that extra sizzle? It means it's getting a little bit hot. I'm gonna turn that fire down just a tiny bit. And these look like they're just about ready to take out. We've got some of these smaller ones over here. I'm going to show you. They're nice and crispy and brown. We don't want to overcook them because they are going to sit for a while we do everything else. And a little bit of pink inside of pork is just fine. It didn't used to be, I know, but it is now. So you can see they're crispy. You can see the little pieces coming off that are just look fabulous. And they are ready to go. We're going to lay these on our rack. And we're going to go on to our next batch. Our pork chips are all cooked. They are sitting on the rack on the oven, cooling and letting all the excess fat drip off so they're not soggy. They're crispy and yummy when we eat them. What we have left here is these are going to be baked pork chops to go inside of a lettuce wrap. So we are going to go ahead and use this plate we've got them on. We're spread them out because we're going to season these guys. And then we're going to bake them. And we're going to bake them on a rack because, you know, it is the beginning of the year, and even though it's Super Bowl, there's a lot of people out there watching what they eat. Their New Year's resolution was to lose some weight or eat a little better, something like that. This is going to give those guests of yours that option. Again, we're going to use very similar seasonings. We are going to use our granulated garlic and onion. We are going to spread it on here liberally because we want it to have a fabulous taste inside of that lettuce wrap. Now, I have never been a big fan of lettuce wraps because usually what's inside isn't tasty enough. So I'm making my own so that I can be a fan. So we've got some onion there, we're going to get some garlic, then we're going to turn them over. Now, on the pork chips, we didn't add any salt. Two reasons for that. The Parmesan has salt in it, and the chips have salt. So if we added salt to that, whew, those things would be too salty to eat. These, we will add a little bit of salt to. We will just dust the top of them on one side after we're finished with all of our other seasonings, and we're going to add some fresh ground peppercorns. You know how I love those things. Let's see. This is looking really good. Okay, make sure that you cover every single piece. If you miss a piece, then somebody's going to get one and say, oh, it wasn't that good. So you don't want anybody to miss out on all the hard work that you put into everything. So there we go. Grab my towel, grab my hands, and I've got some sea salt here. We're just going to sprinkle a little bit over the top, making sure we hit each piece with just a little bit of salt. The salt helps bring out that flavors that we've put on there. We don't want to miss out on that. And I've got my fresh ground peppercorns. They're just about ready. That is the best smell in here, let me tell you. So we will sprinkle a little bit of this over each one also, and then we're going to transfer these to our baking sheet. We've got a rack sitting on our baking sheet ready to go. Okay, almost there. Again, make sure you get every single piece. You don't want someone to miss out on your yummy flavors. Okay, here's our baking sheet. We've got a rack right on top of it so that any of the fats will drip right off of the pork chops onto the pan and not stay in there. And so you've got an even healthier meal that way. So we're just going to arrange these on here right next to each other. And we're going to put these in an oven at 350. These are really small, thin pieces, so it shouldn't take more than about 15 minutes total from the time you put these in here until they're completely done and ready to take out. So let's go ahead and get them all arranged. We're almost there. We will put these in the oven. Then we're going to make our chutney that you can either use on your wraps, you can use on your finger foods for your pork chips, or you can also just have it as a side dish if there's anything else you have. If you have some veggies or some potatoes or anything that anyone wants to dip them in, if you make some shrimp, it's great for that. So let's pop these in the oven and get moving on to our next step. While our pork chops are baking, we are going to get started on that chutney. We are going to use today nectarines and pears. Delicious combination, delicious fruit. So what we first want to do is we are going to peel these because we don't want the peel to be in the chutney. It won't taste as good. Sometimes the peels can be a little bit bitter, and we don't want that at all. So we are going to peel our 2 pears and our 2 nectarines. Now you can make more than this if you want. If you want to double the recipe, it'll give you just a lot more to use. We're just going to have a little side dish. In my house, they don't use that much sauce. I probably use more sauce than anybody else does. My husband just doesn't like too much sauce, so we just kind of compromise. I make the sauce and he can use it or he doesn't have to. These are Bartlett pears. They are very sweet and very soft, which makes it really good for that chutney because what it does, it helps everything mush up a little bit better. Now I cut the tops off just to make it easier to start the peeling process. You don't have to cut the tops off if you don't want to. I'll end up cutting off the bottom while we chop these up and put these in our bowl. So it doesn't really matter, it's up to you. Now you can see these Bartlett pears sometimes tend to look really ugly on the outside. That's okay. They're beautiful on the inside. They're a little bit softer than some of the other pears, and they're a little bit sweeter too. It's one of the things I definitely like about them. Now we're gonna peel these nectarines too. Just because the skin on the nectarines especially can tend to be a little bit bitter. Not always. Now the other suggestion I would have is if you can't find nectarines, use peaches. Now the best peaches are a donut peach or a Saturn peach. They look exactly the same, they just have a different name depending on who grew them. They are a round peach that looks like somebody took it and squished it. So they're about this thick. Instead of being this kind of a shape, they look like a donut. And they are absolutely a delicious, delicious peach. They will work for anything you want to do peaches for, but especially for a chutney. Now, this one's a little bit messy. It's okay. Just keep holding on to it. If you want to use a traditional peeler, might be easier on some of these fruits that get a little slimy. I'm going to use my fruit knife here. I've got my finger in here. These are really ripe. Now, here's one way you can tell these are really ripe. My finger's at the top where the stem is, my thumb is. There's our pit. That way we can just peel this right open, take the rest of the skin off, and we will go ahead and slice up this nectarine to put in our chutney. Now chutney is really just kind of like a relish with fruit and some other seasonings or however you want to do it. So we're going to do this. We'll see if we missed any of the pit. Got a little piece right here. Get that out of there. And we'll make sure we don't have any skin. There's one little piece right there. We've got that off. Cut these up. We'll go ahead and cut up our pears. We are going to take the center out, the core of the pear out, because this part right here just has a little bit of seed in it and it doesn't taste as good. We're going to just chop these up into little pieces too, and it doesn't have to be any kind of uniform kind of a cut that you use on these. It's all going to get kind of squished together as we put it in the bowl anyway, and that's what we want. We want it to end up being like a dip or like a chunky salsa. It's a good description. So here's the bottom of the pear. We'll cut that off because we don't want that in there. And we will take out the core again. And slice these up. Now, one thing I would suggest, you always want to taste as you go, right? Taste your pear. That is a delicious pear. You should also taste your nectarine just to make sure. That way you know when you're seasoning, when you're going to add some salt or you're going to add some sugar, you kind of have a better idea of how much you want to add. Now this pear seems to be a little bit overripe in the center, so we're just going to cut out what's overripe. Not a problem. There we go. Do the same thing on this one. Okay. We're almost finished. Now before we do that other nectarine, I'm going to wipe this counter up because the nectarines are a little bit slimy. So it's harder to hold on to everything and we want to be safe with our knives. So I will grab a towel here in just a second, wipe this up, and then we will move on to what else goes in there. We're going to put some fresh garlic. We're going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar. We're going to taste it. And then we're gonna go ahead and kind of mash it up, and we're gonna let it sit. What we want it to do is incorporate all of those flavors so that it gets everything in one bite when you take a bite of this thing. Okay. I'm gonna grab my towel real quick. I can start to hear a little bit of those pork chops that are in the oven. They're dripping a little bit, which means they are starting to cook, and that is fabulous. That's exactly what we want. So we're gonna move this over. Give ourselves a little bit of a dry area, which is perfect. Put my handy dandy little slicer on and slice our second nectarine. This one seems to be a little more sturdy. It's not quite as ripe, which is okay because that will give us a little bit different texture. The other one will be softer and a little bit mushier. This one might have a little bit more stand up to it. Okay, almost done. And you can see it's starting to get slimy again. It's okay, all done. Now, we'll see, this one is just perfectly ripe again. Here comes that pit. Now we can pull this open and slice away. Now we didn't taste the last nectarine, so we definitely want to taste this one. I can tell you the last one was very, very ripe, so let's take a little bite of this. That is perfect. It has a little bit of tang to it, but it still has a great nectarine flavor. This is going to be great for our chutney. Okay, let's put all this in our bowl. And then what we're going to do next is clean all this up so that we have a good area to work on, and I'll be right back to show you how to put everything else in there. Our table's all cleaned up and we're ready to move on. We have our peaches, or no, not peaches, sorry, our nectarines and our pears in here. We're gonna go ahead and just kind of smash these up a little bit. Just gonna mix them. And then the next thing we're gonna do is add some crushed garlic. Sounds kind of strange, but it is so delicious with what we're making this for. So I've got some garlic cloves here. I think we're gonna put, for this amount, we are going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 probably medium-sized cloves in here and crush this. I'm gonna crush this twice and I'll show you why. The first time, we're gonna get most of the garlic out. We'll scrape it off, we'll lift it up, and you can see a lot of it has pushed its way around. We're just gonna put that right back in there and crush it one more time because we don't wanna lose any of that. This is delicious. And there we go. See, we got about maybe a quarter of the amount out again, but that's okay, why waste it? It's delicious, it's fresh garlic. Now you can smell this. Oh, it smells so good. This combination is wonderful. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna add just a pinch of salt, and we're gonna add a pinch of sugar. So we've got our sea salt. That's all we're gonna add. And we're gonna do the same thing and add a pinch of sugar, because we want everything to be so delicious and combined together and just be a yummy, yummy extra topping that goes on here. So what we're gonna do is leave this out at room temperature. As we cook everything else, what we wanna do is keep stirring it. What that does is it breaks down the nectarine and it breaks down the peach a little, the pear a little bit, and it combines it all together. After it's been out for about 15 minutes and we have stirred it a few times, then you can go ahead and throw it in the refrigerator if you want. Let's see. Now, I'm a big fan of tasting things, so now that it's all mixed up, I'm gonna get a little fork out, we're gonna taste it. Make sure we're on the right track. I've got a little piece of the nectarine, a little piece of the pear. I've got both of them so we can see how it's going. That is really, really good. This is gonna be delicious. I'm telling you, with the pork chops, fruit goes so well, you're really gonna love this. So I think our pork chops that are in the oven are just about to ready to take out. So we'll set this aside, we'll get those out, and we will move on to our next step. All of our stuff is ready to go. I'm gonna show you what we're gonna build, and it's gonna be absolutely delicious. We are going to start with our wrap. This is some of the baked pork chop, sliced up, put it on here. We've got some Swiss cheese, And we've got some sliced tomato. Actually, that's kind of big, so let me cut that in half, make it easier to put in here. We've also got some yummy green onion and some parsley. Now, what we're gonna put on this is, we're gonna put some of this chutney. It looks delicious. It's gonna be a great combination. And I'm telling you, it is, oh, so good. So there's one of our yummy treats ready to go. And we're gonna do our second one now. This is our pork chip. You can either have it plain, just like this, on your plate with some of that chutney, or we'll make a little sandwich. This is my favorite hot sauce. This is called Tennessee Sunshine. We found this when we were out on a trip in this little shack of a nothing fish place. This was sitting on the table and they sold it there, and I'm telling you, it is the best tasting hot sauce I have ever had. I'm gonna add some of this on here and flip it over so it stays on the bun. Then I'm gonna put some Swiss cheese on this one too. Top it off, and there you go. 2 fabulous things that you can have for your Super Bowl party. You can actually make it into 3 because you can have those pork chips as just a finger food themselves with that chutney. Got a little sandwich, got your little lettuce wrap here, and you are ready to go. I'm gonna have a little bite of this, and I'm telling you, I'm gonna eat the whole thing, not just a little bite. So until next time, thanks for hanging with Wow Mom. Thank you again to Mike Anderson at Keller Williams Realty for sponsoring us today. And until I see you again, keep on cooking with Wow.